Good evening, friends, and welcome to tonight's conversation, the second in a three-part series on the Black church and public policy, the urgency of now. My co-host and I, Reverend Dr. Forrest Harris, the director of the Kelly Miller Smith Institute, and I am, of course, Dr. Teresa Smallwood, representing the Public Theology and Racial Justice Collaborative, are just delighted to have the energy around consulting and chatting with area clergy. We still believe that the Black church is the most influential institution in the Black community. And in this moment of absolute regress, we're delighted to have some indomitable speakers with us. I'm very happy that tonight's conversation will be moderated by the Reverend Dr. Christopher Jackson. Dr. Christopher Jackson is a native of Chattanooga, Tennessee, the second son of Mr. and Mrs. Andrew and Christine Jackson. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. He completed the Master of Divinity degree at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and his Doctor of Ministry degree at United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. His ministry experience includes serving campus ministry at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, University of Louisville, Lincoln University in Missouri, and 10 years at the Tennessee State University, Fisk University, and American Baptist College in Nashville. He co-founded Creative Ministry Consultants, which provides seminars and counseling and ministry consulting on a national basis. And he served as Minister of Nurture at the Temple Church and as adjunct professor at Tennessee State in sociology, where he taught courtship and marriage and the family. He is married to Dr. Corinne D. Jackson, who is a director of the TSU Honors College. Their sons are Joshua, Julian, and Jemiah. And their special interests include music, drama, interpretive movement, reading, nature, visual art, basketball, and photography. I'm most happy to announce that he is the current president of the Interdenominational Ministers Fellowship and the pastor of the illustrious Pleasant Green Baptist Church since 2013. I want to say to you all, as you visit with us tonight, that it is our intention to utilize these conversations and to build upon them to create what we're thinking about as a think tank for policy development in the Black community. And it's my hope that in these early and urgent conversations that we'll begin to feel each other, understand each other, and to know the things that we must be representative of and prophetic about. Dr. Harris, would you like to greet the people?
Thank you, Dr. Smallwood, and thank you, our panelists, for joining this series of webinars on the Black church and public policy, the urgency of now. And as Dr. Smallwood just mentioned, we hope that we can develop solidarity around a think tank that will help Black churches in our area and maybe model across the state and nation how Black churches can come together to create a voice for public policy decision-making and formation as it relates to government, as it relates to our communities that need our voice and need our strategies for liberation purposes. So I'm thankful that you have gathered with this panel and gathered on this panel and for the audience that will be listening. Thank you very much. And as we join with you, we are looking forward to the discussion.
Dr. Jackson, you may take it away. I'm very interested in basically connecting every dot, because as we think about Kelly Miller Smith and his legacy, as we move into the October 28th period when we will do a day-long symposium around his legacy and celebrating what would have been his 100th birthday, it is certainly important for us as prophetic people in the earth today to be on top of the issues as he was, to really consume for our people the need for God's hand in the land. Dr. Jackson, take it away.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Smallwood, and thank you, Dr. Harris, for the warm, kind invitation for us to come and share on this panel. I am excited about what will take place in just a few minutes. As I think about Kelly Miller Smith Sr. and his legacy on a personal note, I can remember as a child riding on a train coming up from Chattanooga, and my parents visiting in the home of Kelly Miller Smith Sr. and also sharing at the church at First Baptist Capitol Hill. So it's a very personal and gratifying experience to be sharing in this space and place when it comes to on today and this topic today about the Black church and public policy, the urgency of now. So welcome all of those who are sharing on the line, Facebook Live or what have you. And we just want to share and talk about that. As I thought about Kelly Miller Smith and his legacy, and he did a series that's in the special collections at Vanderbilt Library and also the Kelly Miller Smith Institute. And there's some of you may remember that Robert P. N. Warren, when he did the collaboration of Who Speaks for the Negro. And in that, he shares an experience in which they were trying to desegregate the lunch counters here in Nashville, Tennessee. And as they were in there, they did a trial run. They did a trial run of individuals from a mixed type of group to go in to just talk to them to see if they could sit and be served. And of course, as they went and they tried to be served, they were denied. And there was a floor walker who came along, a white gentleman who came along and listened to what they were saying and doing. And he said to them, and I quote, "If you people wanted to, you could change this policy." And that statement was somewhat of a revelation for the group. And Kelly Miller Smith, along with several others, joined in with the great legacy of Jim Lawson. And Jim Lawson, of course, had traveled to India, and he was the one that was not a neophyte in this whole nonviolent uh, social resistance. And so they gathered together, and the rest of his history. And I'm just so glad to say at IMF, we will, for our MLK Day, be having Jim Lawson as our featured speaker. And I'm just waiting with anticipation to see what he would have to share with us. And as we prepare ourselves for our panelists, we have a variety of things to talk about, and I'm looking forward to sharing with our panelists. And I will go ahead and introduce our first panelist, and we are going in alphabetical order. And so I'm excited to introduce our first panelist, personal friend of mine. He is Pastor Keith Caldwell. Pastor Caldwell is a native of Nashville, Tennessee, and while attending American Baptist College, he was selected to be and elected to be the Student Government Association president. He earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree in theology. He later earned a Master of Divinity degree from Vanderbilt University Divinity School. He first became actively involved politically through the labor union, organizing as a union steward in the SEIU Local 205 Labor Union, and went on to become a grassroots community organizer with the Nashville Peace and Justice Center, where he later became an executive director. In 2005, he co-founded Urban Epicenter, an African-American organization that was formed in order to address the glaring injustices of the systemic racism. The organization's mission focused on doing justly at the intersection of race and poverty. Caldwell is a former president of the Nashville branch of the NAACP, served as a board member of the Scarrett Bennett Center, and is on the advisory council of the IMF in Nashville. He's currently the provisional elder in the United Methodist Church, recently became the pastor of the historic C. Hubbard Church in South Nashville. He's a proud father of 4 adult children, Kurt, Paige, Zoe, and Elijah. I give to you our modern day urban scholar and prophet, none other than the Reverend Pastor Keith Caldwell.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Reverend Jackson. And I'm thankful to Dr. Smallwood, Dean Towns, and Dr. Forrest Harris, and many others. We are thinking about what this means to be the Black church in this fierce urgency of now. And I would say that the Black church still is the preeminent voice for the Black community. When we think about our Pan-Hellenic, our historic civil rights organizations, Urban League, NAACP, when we think about our HBCUs, all of these institutions, we share a common ancestor, and she is the Black church. And she was born before this nation was a nation. She was born on the auction block. I like to say when she was scantily clad, objectified, and still resist. When they wanted to look in her mouth, she jerked her head and said, I'm going to find a way to live. And so we are the beneficiaries of a slave church. And let me talk about an Exodus church. So James Cone talks about we have to find the cross. The cross is at the center of who we are. So I say the Black church is very powerful, but she becomes more powerful when she speaks truth to power, when she understands holistically every dimension of our existence, and not just some by and by yonder ways kind of reality, but to deal holistically with the needs of the people, our social, political, economic, physical, and spiritual dimensions. So I'm delighted to always live at, and even through this existential crisis that we are in with a pandemic that is of apocalyptic proportions, that is the time we shouldn't waste a perfectly good disaster. We can reset and we can actually order our steps in the Lord. So I'm so glad to be with you all again, and blessings.
Thank you so much, Pastor Caldwell. Next, we have our second speaker to give the 2 or 3 minute introductions. He's also no stranger to me. My former pastor at the Temple Church, Pastor Daryl Antonio Drumright, is a native of Nashville, completed his undergraduate studies at Tennessee State University, where he earned a Bachelor of Science in Sociology. He later matriculated at Harvard University and earned his Master's of Divinity there. After returning to Nashville from Cambridge, he served as associate assistant pastor under the leadership of the founding pastor of Temple Church, Bishop Michael E. Graves. He also served as a faculty member at the American Baptist College, is currently a member of the college's board of trustees. Pastor Drumright is a member of the American Academy of Religion and Society for the Study of Biblical Literature, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. And under Pastor Drumright's leadership, Temple Church has experienced tremendous growth numerically, spiritually, financially, and has become a debt-free congregation after liquidating about $6 million in capital debt. He's married to LaTanya T. Drumright. They're parents of 2 sons, DeMarcus and Demarius, and the grandparents of Braxton. Thank you so much, Pastor Drumright. Take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson, and thank you, Dr. Smallwood and Dr. Harris for the invitation. Pastor Caldwell said a lot of what I was going to say, but what I will also emphasize about the African American or the Black church in this moment is that in recovering and operating fully in our prophetic witness, we have to reclaim becoming all things to all people in many ways, even in this season, even in the midst of the pandemic. There are many people who are dependent on the Black church to represent in so many different ways, and we've got to be bold not only in our verbal proclamation, but we've got to be just as bold in our witness, being present and active in politics, present and active in the educational system, present and active in the meeting the needs of our community. And so thank you again for this invitation.
Thank you so much, Pastor Drumright. Our next speaker is Elder Jessica Gansey. She hails from Detroit, Michigan. She's a graduate of Ferris State University and Vanderbilt Divinity School, where she earned a Master's of Divinity with a certification in Black Church Studies. Her thesis was entitled Pastoral Authority in Crisis. It examines the messianic leadership of Moses. Elder Jessica is a dynamic teacher, currently serves as Director of Christian Education at Mount Zion Baptist Church here in Nashville, where she was ordained to the ministry under the leadership of presiding Bishop Joseph Warren Walker III of the Full Gospel International Fellowship. She's called to re-educate Christian believers generally and the Black church specifically through the decolonization of the Christian education endeavor and its materials, and reclaim the liberating, transformative power of the Christian faith. She's married to her amazing college sweetheart, Darius Ganzi Sr., and mother of the most brilliant, adventurous 4-year-old on the planet, Darius Ganzi Jr., affectionately known as DJ. Thank you so much, Elder Ganzi. Take it away.
Greetings, and thank you so much for this invitation. I want to thank Dr. Smallwood and Dr. Harris, of course, Dr. Jackson, just for allowing me to be a part of such a dynamic and necessary conversation. I am truly excited about what is to come. The Black church has always done a really good job with reimagining our realities. The Black church is a locale for new possibilities. And so it is so important that the Black church is right in line with its heritage of being able to mobilize our communities to do God's work in the world and to bring forth change where change needs to happen. And so I'm so proud to be a person that is a product of the Black church and also now a leader in that wonderful heritage that we share. So thank you. I'm excited about having this conversation with my amazing colleagues, and it's good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Ganzi. Our next speaker is no stranger to us here in Nashville. He's a native of Flint, Michigan. Pastor Marble, Pastor Aaron X. Marble, holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Business Administration from Xavier University, Cincinnati, Ohio. In addition, he holds a Master of Divinity in Pastoral Leadership from Cincinnati Christian University. Pastor Marble is the senior pastor of the Jefferson Street Missionary Baptist Church. During his tenure, membership has increased, debt has been eliminated, and new ministries have been established. He served as a youth and young adult pastor of the 3,000 member Inspirational Baptist Church, City of Destiny. And during his tenure at Inspirational, Reverend Marble was instrumental in developing numerous ministry initiatives aimed at the spiritual enrichment of youth and young adults. Pastor Marble is a proud financial member of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. He currently served in leadership positions at the National NAACP and the IMF. Pastor Marble is married to Lydia, who is an occupational therapist and who assists him in ministry endeavors. They're blessed with a daughter, Noelle Grace. Thank you so much, Pastor Marble. Take it away.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for that introduction. And thank you to Dr. Smallwood and Dr. Harris for hosting us in this conversation, and to all of your staff who has helped to make this possible this evening. I certainly want to thank all of my colleagues tonight on the panel, whom are brilliant, and I so look forward to having this discussion with them. I echo their sentiments about the strength, the power, and the influence of the Black church. I am a product. I often tell people I spent more time at church than I did at home. And I thank God for my Sunday school teachers, my pastors, all who showed me what it meant to be Christian and what it meant to be unapologetically Black. And in this season where our Blackness is threatened, it is the prophetic voice of the Black church that holds us together and gives us the courage and the strength to love our Blackness and love ourselves. And I think it's so important that we have that during this time. And so I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight and looking forward for the things to come that flow out of this conversation for our city and the Black church at large.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Pastor Marble. Our next speaker is the Reverend Dr. Sheila Peters. She's another colleague of mine. I appreciate her. She has earned her BA in psychology with honors from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and MS and PhD in clinical psychology from Vanderbilt University. Dr. Peters is a licensed clinical psychologist with expertise in working with diverse populations, including vulnerable children and youth and their families. Dr. Peters is a national expert on youth development in the juvenile justice arena and provides training and technical assistance on gender-specific programming for females as well as males at risk for entering the juvenile justice system. Dr. Peters has maintained a part-time private practice working with young children to seniors for over 25 years and values the opportunity to provide a safe therapeutic environment for individuals to move forward in positive directions. She's a lifetime member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Dr. Peters is humbled to be pastor of Braden United Methodist Church and on the Red River District leadership team. The Braden congregation is a member of the first cohort of the Claiming Lives of Meaning and Purpose initiative at the American Baptist College. Welcome, Dr. Peters.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson, and to everyone, good evening. It is a pleasure to be a part of this panel, and I certainly thank Dr. Smallwood and Dr. Harris and the leadership, the thinking that has gone into putting together this dynamic set of events leading up and celebrating the birthday of the esteemed Kelly Miller Smith. I certainly want to echo what all of my colleagues have said, and we understand how important the Black church has been. I want to think just for a moment of the Sankofa bird that teaches us to look back, to fetch back as we go forward. The Black church has been so strong in our communities that we have to look today at how our Black church is treated. How are we using the Black church not only to heal those who have been hurt, those who have been left out and overlooked, but how are we using it to speak up and to speak out? I am reminded as we gathered just a few weeks ago, an African-American male was in the midst of dealing with a confrontation, and as he returned to his car with the police following him, he was shot multiple times in his back. And yet as he lay in the hospital bed, Mr. Blake still had the handcuffs on him. While others were protesting this injustice, a young white male by the name of Kyle Rittenhouse with a gun fit for war, was shooting other folks. The police passed this young man with a weapon in the middle of the street and did nothing to him. You see, our policy in this country is broken. Our policy in this country sees black and brown bodies as less than. Our policies are broken. Our public policy needs the Black church of old, renewed, and revived in our present time. Our public policy will be better for the strength of the Black church. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peters. At this time, we're going to ask all the panelists to come back on and start your video. Thank you all for your opening statements. And at this time, we're going to engage in a no holds barred event. I mean, this is the time, you know, in WWE, when everybody gets in there and it's no rules, just go for it. That's what we're going to do. And certainly we hope to get something very positive coming out of this and something that we all can gain and we all can use. And so I'm just going to start off with a question to the panelists, and you all can each respond. If you had to choose the top 3 items or issues within the African American community that you feel are most pressing, you know, the title of what we're talking about today is the urgency of now. What would you say would be, from your own individual perspectives, would be the top 3 pressing issues among the African American community that the Black church can actually address? Whoever would like to be first, go right ahead.
I'd say policing, education, and economic disparity.
Okay, let's write that down. Say it again.
Policing, education, and economic disparities.
Okay. Would you like to just elaborate a little bit of why you chose those 3?
Those 3 are pretty much the 3 that are closest to my passion, but also I see them, we cannot deny that even in our own city, that policing and issues surrounding policing are at the forefront, even as we look at our journey towards selecting a new police chief and not repeating some of the same patterns that went on with our previous police chief. Education, even though we're on virtual right now, when we're in school, I'm in metro schools, especially the public schools, at least 2 to 3 times a week. The church must get back in the schools because our kids spend more time in school than they do in church. And then economic disparities, that kind of speaks for itself in various categories.
All right, thank you, Pastor Jerome. And as we go on, please don't be afraid to, if someone shared something that you had chosen, just go ahead and you sort of defend what you chose. Who will be next? Does anybody else would like to?
I'll jump on in. I kind of echo Pastor Drumright with the plague of police brutality for sure, and health and healthcare disparities, as well, of course, as educational inequalities. And I might even add our theological commitments. I think those things, have to be called out, as the Black church has unfortunately sometimes mimicked oppressive theologies. And if we're going to do some liberation work, then we're going to have to get free first from the kind of stuff that we're preaching and teaching, and move away from that into a vein and reclaim that liberative, transformational power of the Christian faith.
Elder Gansey, what do we need to get free from? Help us out. Share it with us. Come on. What do we need to be loosed from? Come on with it. Come on.
Well, I have done some work, of course, in Christian education. And so I'll kind of talk a little bit to that. It is something, the ways that our Christian education departments are completely overlooked, in the ways that it serves as a catalyst. It is a source for the kind of content that we give to people, right? So when we talk about these different disparities and so on and so forth in our communities, in the ways that we vote or the lack thereof, a lot of that comes from people's claims. They may believe that, God is going to fix it all. I don't have to get involved. God is in control. But I tell people, God is in control, but we do determine who's in charge. And we have to get out there. We have to start doing and embodying the things that we're saying. So when we say thy kingdom come, thy will be done, right? What are we talking about? Are we talking about something on the hereafter? Or are we talking about here? And I like that Jesus in that claim doesn't leave it to the hereafter. He says thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, almost to say if it's real good in heaven, then we're going to have to let that goodness show right here where we are. And so I like the way that he is bridging the ways that we have to take care of some things here. That abundant life that we preach about, we're going to have to start bringing that to pass. And we do that oftentimes through public policy. We do that through the engagement, as Pastor John said, us getting into the schools, us getting into different spaces and letting our presence be made known.
Wow, Elder Gansey, thank you for sharing that. I think as you talked about, I thought about the fact that not only should we concentrate on public policy, but we got to start with church policy, community policy, and then personal policy. I'm just gonna go on and say it. I sent out this notice about this conversation to a lot of people. One of the responses, I got some good responses, but one of the responses that I received back, it said that why are you focusing on Black church? It's this self-loathing. It's this whole mentality that kind of elevates others higher or more than in our own community. And I know specifically the church where this person came from is a Black church. You may not even want to call it that or whatever, but I mean, there's not one white member in the church at all, period. So we got a lot of work to do in our own community in terms of that. And as we go on through the panel, and Pastor Drumright, we'll be circling back to you again to something you mentioned about the police chief. We got to talk about that. We got to deal with that. All right.
Pastor Jackson, I was going to, as your question to us, the top 3 things, as I was thinking through it, I couldn't think of 3 problems that didn't stem from white supremacy, and that Black folks' biggest problem in America right now is America, and the systemic injustice that's been baked into our nation, that we see the trickle down effect of, whether it be education, economics, policing, all of those things stem from the origin of white supremacy that has oppressed us. And Sister Gansey, Elder Gansey, put it right on the head. We even have to correct our theology, as you just mentioned, that white supremacy even erodes and invades our thinking about ourselves. And we'll put ourselves down, and that is a cause of white supremacy. And so in this season, I think the Black church's role is of course to organize, is of course to be strategic, is of course to gather us. But as I've been teaching at Jefferson Street, we also have to remember that this thing is spiritual, and that white supremacy and oppression is demonic. And while we have to organize for elections, elections don't remove demons, exorcisms do that. And the first demons we have to wrestle with are internal, to make sure we have not digested white supremacy in how we think, interact, see God, work through our own homiletic and hermeneutic to ensure that we exercise white supremacy from our own thinking. And then we will do that work, as Elder mentioned, about freeing ourselves and liberating ourselves. But we've got to recognize this thing is spiritual wickedness in high places. And as the church, be able to prophetically speak to that while we still organize and do the practical things that are necessary to make God's kingdom present on earth as well.
Oh, Pastor Marvel.
Let me jump in, Dr. Jackson.
Come on.
Okay, so this is beautiful. Aaron, that was beautiful. Elder Gansey. And look, the prophetic is the act of imagining with an emancipatory slant, right? So when we look, I call it white supremacism versus white supremacy, because it's an ism and not a statement of fact. But when we track white supremacism, theologically, we have to undo it, as Elder Gansey talked about. And when we track it historically, we can go to the doctrine of discovery, in the 1400s, 1492, right? When Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Here's the historical moment when Isabella and Ferdinand said, in order to be a citizen of Spain, you have to become Christian. You have to get baptized. So when Jews and Moriscos, who were ostensibly Arab and North African, got baptized, they said your baptism isn't complete because of the continuity of your bloodline. When we hear it clearly in the mouth of Jesus, it's whosoever will, let them come. And it's about a conversion into a belief of faith practices. So when they said your baptism isn't complete, Christianity ceased to be about a conversion, and it turns into a biopolitical reality. Christianity turns white in that historical moment. And even worse, it grounds Christianity in the bloodlines of Europe and not in Jerusalem. So Christianity sails across the Atlantic on the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, the Mayflower, gutted out the interiority of the sacrificial gospel of Jesus Christ, replaces it with the ideology of white supremacism. And then on these shores, it gets worked, this white supremacy. So we have to go to an earlier historical moment. We actually have to go back to Matthew, Mark, Luke, John in the text about what Christianity truly is, and stop mimicking this proof of election that we see from this Protestant work ethic with John Calvin. And so this proof of election is economic success. And so if you're not economically successful, somehow you are less moral. And so that shows you with the policing, the education, the whole number. Again, it is white supremacism is demonic. And this kind is cast out through prayer and supplication. Lastly, we live and die by public policy. Every policy that Pharaoh made in Egypt became the law of the land. So when Pharaoh told the children of Israel, you're going to make bricks without straw, well, guess what? It became the law. And I tell you what, see an Israelite that didn't make bricks without straw and see what happened to them. So this idea is my identity before God. There's neither Greek nor Jew, bond nor free, slave nor free, male nor female. But what is your identity before the law of the land? And we have a history of having our identity truncated from being 3/5 to slave codes to convict lease to now the new Jim Crow. So we have to speak into this existential crisis that we're in, and we have to use the word of God in a holistic sense to take care of both. I believe that we pray for everything in the supernatural, and we put our hands to the plow for everything in the natural, which includes telling go tell Pharaoh to let God's people go.
All right, you just going hard in the paint. Pastor Keith Caldwell, thank you so very much. As we prepare to hear from Reverend Dr. Sheila Peters, I do want to say that those who are online, if you do have a question or comment for one of the panelists, please make sure you put it in the chat. And in about 20 minutes or 15 minutes, we will go to that phase of our talk together and share from your comments to have you involved. Reverend Dr. Peters, what say ye?
I just want to add on, and I think all of my colleagues have done a fabulous job of answering that. I want to add and build on what Reverend Caldwell has said, in the sense that we have got to focus on education, that you have to know who you are and whose you are. And in the midst of this pandemic, I hope that we all are realizing, Braden, we were damaged significantly from the tornado and then COVID-19. But I hope we realize that we have an asset in the buildings that we have. And it is not enough for us to go back doing the same things that we've done before. So many children have been issued tablets, but they don't have anybody in their home to sit down and help them to navigate through that. And so it's not enough for us to throw resources at children in our communities. We have to. The Black church has historically been a place where people learned how to be public speakers, because if they were in desegregated classrooms, they might have been overlooked. And so we've got to go back to looking at how we re-educate our community. And it's not just our children. We know that our congregations, our adults have got to believe. We've got to strengthen the family. The family has, when we look historically, it's been attacked over the years. And we can see even tomorrow night, when we look at this vice presidential debate, the way in which they have treated a Black woman who's in a position of power to be able to speak up. And so we continue to see that in our communities. And I know we talked about economic justice. We've got to be not only educating one another within our churches, but we've got to teach people to own things, not just to get a job, but to use your God-given talents to lift all of us. And so I lift up education, strengthening our families, and economic justice, as Reverend Dr. Drumright said, but certainly teaching people within our communities to use the money that we have, use it to change policy if we'll work together.
Wow. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Peters, for you sharing with that. I just want to lift up and continue on and echo one of the things that you said was the strengthening the Black family. Those of you know me know that I have a heart for the Black family, and I do a lot of, relationship counseling and things like that. And I found that when that family unit is strong, it tends to radiate out throughout the community. And when that family unit is weak, it tends to not radiate throughout the community in a negative way, actually. And so that aspect of it, I think, is a non-negotiable for us as we are going to move forward and make a difference. And hopefully that the things that are taught in our strong schools will be undergirded in our strong homes. And this will make a difference as we move forward in our lives and our legacies. Thank you so much. One of the things I'm going to circle back to you, Pastor Drumright, you mentioned about a police chief. We know that Chief Anderson has been 42 years. He's been on the police force. And what I saw was when finally he was kind of forced to resign at just before right after his announcement of resignation, he promoted about 10 or so police, only one of which was an African-American police. And that is the current acting police chief right now. And so I want to get some input from you all when it comes to policy, when it comes to selection, when it comes to election. I'm serving on the Police Policy Commission right now. But what are your thoughts or feelings about the current chief becoming the chief? What are your feelings about who should come and set policy for our community? Hello? No, any thoughts from anyone?
So I'm thinking the previous police chief actually ran it like a mob style. I told several mayors he was the J. Edgar Hoover of Nashville. It was like he was untouchable, and he was very vindictive and all of that. So he's gone. But I don't have anything negative to say about the acting chief, John Drake. I do know that the searches should be, nationwide, but the system is actually the way policing is done. It's a larger problem when you see how the police system is structured. So it's always going to be, it's functioning just as it was designed to function. I was watching the news tonight, and I think, Dr. Peters talked about the man that was walking away and gets shot in the back. See, this dehumanization and this idea that Black embodiment is a crime. So that gets burned into the psyche. So even you get Black and brown officers knowing that they have to perform in this way because they're mimicking. And when I say white supremacism, I want to talk about it very clearly. We're talking about a 500-year-old brutal legacy that we're working to deconstruct and not to tear down white people. Because now we see that there are a lot of white people who are in the streets. We've got white millennials who are protesting for Black life and withdrawing consent from these systems of oppression. So to make sure that we're saying that, and also that we need a nationwide search, and we need to share people who are active in the community, many of you all, to be the decision makers on who that next chief is. Clear.
Okay. Any other input?
I'm sorry, I'm having some technical, my computer keeps freezing a little bit. One of the things I believe is critical in the decision concerning the next police chief is to get not just a select group of community voices, but to go especially into the African-American communities and hear from the people what they expect from the next police chief. The absolutes that will not be negotiable as it pertains to our people. Because if you follow statistics and data in this city, we have been the ones who have been the most mistreated by our police system. And so as we get a leader, I believe it's important that their voices are included in what the expectations are.
Thank you, Pastor Ron. Anyone else on that subject?
I would just add that I think that the leader who the police chief is important. And I think what everyone else has said is vitally important. but the community must stay on the police force no matter who the leader is. We cannot sit back, and that is where churches working together can speak up in regard to that. Because if you're the head of a system that is oppressive, then people may feel better because you are the leader, but you're still the head of something that's evil.
Yes. Thank you. Anyone else?
I would just say that culture is a very difficult obstacle.
Yes.
And that our police department has a culture that must be dismantled, must be revived, must be refreshed. And so I think it's just very important that the committees that the city is placing together does a national search. And it's not to negate the impact or the resume of anybody, but we've got to make sure that the chief that gets the position will fight culture that is incorrect and will hold people accountable. That the police department doesn't just stop with the chief, but there are a host of officers, administrators, staff within the police department that need to be held accountable for their actions and their activity. And we need a chief that does not fear going against culture to keep his team accountable.
Well said. Well said. Anyone else on that subject? All right. Go. Were you going to say something?
Or her team.
Oh, or her team.
Amen. Amen.
Right. Yes. I would say that, to your point, Pastor Marble, culture is one of the most difficult things to change and to shift. And I'm wondering, is it possible, if a person has served over 20 years in a culture, that could really shift your mindset in the middle of that culture and then speak out against and change and shift it? Or should there be some fresh blood coming in from outside in order to begin to make the change? So that's a question that I think we need to ask and answer and move forward. Speaking of policing and policy, of course, all of us have looked on with interest regarding Breonna Taylor's situation in Louisville, Kentucky, when a man or a group of people looking for someone entering the wrong apartment can use a battering ram to break down her door, and then her boyfriend, this is 1 o'clock in the morning, and then her boyfriend can shoot in self-defense, and then in a hail of bullets, she dies in a hail of bullets, being struck 5 times, and then the only charges that is brought is against the apartments, against the people who shot in the apartments of the neighbors, not hers, just the neighbors. And so I echo the sentiments of Van Jones when he said this was a trifecta of injustice. It was injustice in 3 ways. One, it was injustice in policy setting of the no-knock warrants. It was an injustice in terms of policing and the way they executed it. And it was injustice in terms of the prosecution, with Daniel Cameron, a Black Republican who was Attorney General, did not even bring a charge of murder into the grand jury. And so we see that so many things need to be changed when it comes to public policy in policing, and not only policing, but in policy and policing and in prosecution. Anyone want to speak to that? Because we had an example here in our own Nashville of something similar that happened a few weeks ago. Miss Hines' apartment, the police entered at 6:05 in the morning, broke down her door. They said they knocked, but they're looking for a 16-year-old who was stealing auto parts. And they jeopardized the lives of this woman and her 2 children who adopted. They jeopardized their lives over something silly and meaningless and unnecessary. And so a little backstory about that is that Davy Tucker baptized this woman, Miss Hines. And you know the story about the day after when the police had realized their mistake, that the police took $200 worth of groceries from Aldi's to her porch. First of all, you didn't ask the woman what kind of things she liked. And when she refused to receive the groceries, they called the precinct, and the precinct commander said, just leave them there. Yet another violation of her personhood. And so this whole thing about policy and policing, it goes all the way down the line. And we've got a big job to do in making some corrections in that. Comments, anybody?
I just wanted to add, when we talk about the Black church being a space or a site where we can do reimagining, I think that we don't talk enough about reimagining what it looks like to govern or care for our city that doesn't look like our current police structure, right? And so because I think sometimes we're having a hard time with figuring out, well, what will we do instead? Then we talk a lot about reform. But I recall Jesus saying something like, let the dead bury the dead. And there are some things that just needs to die. There are some things that we do a lot of work in trying to resuscitate. And like we've mentioned already, it is doing what it was designed to do. We can't overlook historically why it comes into being. And we can't say all of a sudden we're about to get some sort of liberation out of, in a sense, one of the most faithful departments. And sometimes it's attack and constant terrorism acts towards Black and Brown communities. And so some people join those, and I'm not saying all at all, but a lot of people are joining that because guess what? I can, in some ways, act out these sort of terroristic fantasies towards these particular communities because I wear a badge. And so we are going to have to start saying, what would it look like to do something else? Yeah. And who could be a part of that? And that's where I see the Black church coming in. Imagine what it would look like if people who, I don't even like to use the word patrol, because it always has this, the wording and the language around policing is so steeped in mistrust. It's like, we are watching y'all because we don't trust y'all and we see you as a threat, right? And so there is historically never been a good relationship between the police and Black communities, right? It's not going to just come out of nowhere because there is a Black chief or stuff of that nature. So I think I'm interested in what it would look like to imagine something more than what we already have and who can be a part of that mix. Yeah. Should it just be people that are interested in law enforcement? Should we have therapists? Should we have clergy? Who else needs to be involved in this sort of response so that we can better care? That's what I like to think, care and protect our communities.
Right. Wow. You said a lot, and I say yes to all of those should we's that you shared. I do believe that the police are asked to do a lot of things that they are not really equipped to do and shouldn't have to learn how to do. Even with their training, beauticians have to have more training hours wise than policemen. You got to be able to legally hold a curling iron or what have you than a gun. And so we got to understand that and have some talk and some reimagining, as you said, regarding that. Any other thoughts regarding that? Policing. All
so
right.
Policing also falls under the thing. The core problem of this is, okay, when we think about being liberated from being enslaved in 1865, that's not the problem. That was a problem. What was the mindset that allowed for that to happen to begin with? And it was a dehumanization, and that still prevailing narrative that Black and Brown folks are somehow not fully human. So as Elder Gansey talked about, it's not even being observed. It's not even a gaze. It's surveillance that you're in. It's not that you are committing a crime, is that your presence, your embodiment is a crime, right? And so because of this, this thing around personal responsibility, I think we should always have personal responsibility. What is the communal responsibility to deconstruct the entire way of thinking and the systems that uphold it? And policing has been at the forefront because it's what it can do to your bodies, right? And the threat of what will do to your body. So it's there's a trauma that's in police departments, and there's a trauma that we have in our very bodies. I got pulled over not long ago, and when the blue lights came on, like my stomach acid just flipped over, and I mean just hands, everything. It was a tail light that was out, but my body goes through that every time because I know I am being surveilled in the way, when we look at George Floyd and that policeman that had his hands and going through his pocket while he had his knee on this man's neck, it was like it was like it was a deer with antlers or something. He didn't see this as a human being, and this idea to conquer. And again, that's a spirit, but it can be broken, and the policies have to be broken. So I'm thinking about what can we do, because we have a focus on personal liberty and personal, all these personal liberties. But what about personal collective responsibility? And when we start talking about, you don't hear this even from either of the candidates because you're afraid to be called a socialist. What about, this is bad citizenship if we are so focused on personal liberty and personal responsibility to the dismissal of communal responsibility. How can we be better? So, and it's not sustainable. And who's going to pay when it's not? And we know historically who has paid. So,
thank you
I
so
would
much.
also say, to dovetail off of Reverend Caldwell, when it comes to Black church, we've got to be consistent in our representation and not just what I call be event centered. Because sometimes it seems like to me, we'll do something for a certain season. And then, let's go back, let's go to tornado. Our communities are still ravaged by the effects and effects of the tornado. But what I saw was a lot of folk get into the event centered and do it for so long and then go on, and we still have churches, that are still, dealing with the remnant effects of it. And so look at our communities. I thought about when Reverend Caldwell was talking about the innate nature of policing. We gotta go into our school systems consistently and tell our young ladies and our young men, spend time with them and let them know who they are. Because to me, that's the Jesus model. My model for ministry is Mark 1:40-45. Dr. Jackson they probably got tired of me preaching that text, but I believe that it is a hallmark blueprint for ministry, that Jesus dealing with the leper. Jesus goes where the leper is. Jesus goes where the problem is. And it's not just an event. It is not just for the moment, it's consistent. Pastor Marvel and I, we have a good relationship with our churches to where if there's a need at one, then we can do something. Because the other thing Black churches got to get away from is who's going to get the credit.
Amen.
Because that is a problem for us sometimes. Whose pastor gets the credit? Whose church gets the credit? If we're in this thing together, the kingdom gets the credit,
That's right.
Yeah. I think one thing to piggyback off of the Breonna Taylor comment, particularly as it relates to the Black church, I'm so honored to pastor Jefferson Street, and a part of this is due to the leadership and the efforts of my predecessor, Pastor Tex Thomas, our pastor emeritus, is that we see in the Breonna Taylor situation, a Black man, the Attorney General, David Cameron, who had the opportunity to bring justice and help usher in justice for a Black woman. Reports now are showing that he actively was working against justice for Breonna Taylor. And what we have to look at as the Black church is call out the injustice of Breonna Taylor and the murder of Breonna Taylor. But we also have to look at as how we as a church have treated Black women who primarily, if there weren't Black women, there would be no Black church. And so that same kind of, I like Reverend Caldwell's term, supremacist mentality that we experience as Black people. Black women are taking the brunt of that. And oftentimes, Black women are second class in our churches. And so we've got to make sure that as we call to the table the murder and justice for Breonna Taylor, we've got to make sure that we are not murdering the dreams, the hopes, the callings, the visions, the passions, the wealth of Black women in our churches as the Black church, because we have done criminal activity to Black women. We have hurt Black women as the institution, and we have to hold ourselves accountable for that as well.
Great, wonderful, well said, Pastor Marble. Thank you for that. It is now 8:04, and we're going to go to see if there are any comments or questions from our audience. We have 44 participants on the line, and I'm going to ask Ms. Brown if there are any comments or questions, if you could. All right, so I see one comment is, what specifically does the Black church bring to the realities facing Black and brown folk, and how can these capacities be activated? I'll repeat it again. What specifically does the Black church bring to the realities facing Black and brown folk, and how can these capacities be activated? Anyone who care to respond?
I would say in response to that is that the Black church has a lot of power if we work together and use it in such a way that we can help to bring forth opportunities within our communities, that people can be protected. I don't think there's any one thing. I think each church and our coalitions of churches have different ways in which they can position themselves. I want to kind of tie it back in our whole discussion about white supremacy, and just as Reverend Marble was talking about Breonna Taylor in that framework, we've got to, in the church and within the community, teach people about the oppressor and teach them about what we have gone through. And I lift up, not a theologian, but I lift up when we're talking about white supremacy, some of the thinking of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, and in the fact that in colorism alone, it is embedded across the continents. And when I teach this to students at FIS, it blows their mind. It's because nobody's had that conversation with them. If you look at the game of pool, what is the object of the game of pool? The object of the game of pool is for that white ball to get the other colored balls out of the way so it can knock the Black ball in the hole. We have to understand that is fundamental to white supremacy, but we don't teach that. And that's not to teach hatred, but it's to talk about a system. And so right now, it burns me up. I'm glad I'm on this panel so that I have good folks that can pray with me and pray for me. To hear people say, if Black folks don't come out and vote, and I know we need to come out and vote, but white people, white supremacy is the reason that Donald Trump is where he is. White supremacy is the reason why you can be halfway sick and still do a mini series walking up in front of the White House. If President Obama and Mrs. Obama had done half of the stuff that he has done, but we've got to look at that. We've got to teach that among our leadership, and we've got to teach folks how do we deal with that. We've got white brothers and sisters and others that want to talk about this right now, and I've resisted some discussions. I just joined a discussion recently because I believe in being open-minded. But how many more times do we have to sit and help our white brothers and sisters go through this? Because they're going to wake up in the morning and be white. I'm still going to be Black. no matter what I go through. And we've got to deal with that. So it is in vogue for our white brothers and sisters right now. But how long will that last? The Black church can make sure it lasts indefinitely.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so very much.
I'd like to answer that question about it is the church that is the only institution that has been ordained by God for the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. So it is the church that has I believe we are a resurrection people and all the power that comes with that. And so not just having the power, but to exercise that power. This idea that somehow we have to wait to the great by and by in order to see any justice. And I can look around in Green Hills and Belle Meade, and I see folks that are receiving justice on this side of the grave, and somehow I've got to die in order to see it. No, it doesn't work that way, right? So we can actually make justice a reality on this side of the grave, and that's through impacting both public policy and still working to change the hearts and minds. But even if they don't change the hearts and minds, the legislative piece will get you freer than what you were before. But the spirit dimension is powerful. And I want to say we have the power of the Holy Spirit. But to use it, but this fear, if you're afraid, that's okay to be afraid, but don't be paralyzed by fear. Perfect love cast out all fear, for fear hath torment, and he or she that feareth is not made perfect in love. And what are they going to do to you that they haven't already done? The moment you withdraw consent and you begin to live into your baptismal identity as a church, then you begin to see the reign of God, the inbreaking of God. Last thing, most of the students in the civil rights movements were baptized Christians, but also Bull Connor and others were baptized Christians. So this is it is a struggle over interpretation. And if you interpret that I'm not fully human, we can't just agree to disagree. If you interpret that I'm not fully human, now you try to place me in an existential crisis, and you can't do that to me. So I'm going to get your foot off my neck while I am teaching you how to be more human, but your foot coming off my neck first.
Right. Yeah, I certainly agree with you that public policy is also a matter of interpretation. When we go back to those no-knock warrants, some of the people, they would knock one time, wait 3 seconds, and then burst in and would say, well, it was, I knocked, so it wasn't a no-knock. And so interpretation is a big part of the whole scenario. We have another question. Were you gonna speak, Pastor Drumright?
I was just going to, I lost my train of thought there for a minute. I was going to say, we as a Black church have really got to embrace what our foreparents, the prophetic witness of dealing with the things that we don't really want to deal with, speaking the truths that nobody wants to say, and even starting that with the preaching moment, preaching truth to power, but also not being fearful to address issues that folk don't want to address. And I thought about, even when Reverend Marple was talking about how we have mistreated our women in Black church, I thought about the fact, I started a series on Esther. I have never preached the book of Esther. Dr. Peters, I have kept looking. I said, I'm just going to jump to chapter 2. But then I went and did research on how many males have ever preached about Queen Vashti and how she was mistreated. So I said, I'm not going to repeat that cycle. I'm going to preach on Queen Vashti. I'm going to do the best I can to do justice to her, because I believe she was mistreated by the power structure. And you don't get a Queen Esther unless you have a Queen Vashti. But there again, we've got to be willing to tell some truths and deal with some dirt, uproot some roots that if we're going to make progress as a Black church, some of that stuff you're going to have to just tell the truth about.
Yeah. And so I believe that that's part and parcel of it, as you said, Pastor Drumright, speaking truth to power in the church, but also outside of the church, and not being beholden to anyone. When the whole deal came down about dealing with the chief of police thing, and Anderson was still in power. You know, there was a call that came through, or through another individual, that he wanted to speak to IMF regarding that. And I said, well, we can't speak to you until you first speak to the COB. He had neglected and ignored the COB his whole time here. And so we've got to get to a point and a place where it's not about power, it's not about credit, it's not about anything but truth and justice. And when we get to that place, then I think we can move forward in righteousness. We have another question here, and it says, how can scholars and theologians help more Black pastors and churches to embrace anti-racism and liberation theology? I'll repeat. How can scholars and theologians help more Black pastors and churches to embrace anti-racism and liberation theology?
I would argue that we have to be very careful not to pit the academy and the church against each other, because as it comes to liberation theology, the Black preacher, the Nat Turners, the unspoken men and women who preached the gospel and got hold of a full Bible in the Brush Harbor, and got hold of full scripture in the Brush Harbor, were liberation theologians. And so I think while the academy can speak to the church and the church can speak to the academy, we have to be sure that we don't put them at odds, because there is a innate nature that the Black preacher brings to the hermeneutic of liberation that can't be wrestled away from the experience that is Black church. So I think it is a both and I think that both help each other. It is a relationship that is not based in paternalism, but that is a cohabitation between the academy and the church.
Big Marble, come on.
Yeah.
In.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Can
sir.
I pick up on that, Reverend Marble?
Come on.
Okay, so even when we talk about liberation theology, we know that's contextualizing the theology. While we let white supremacism theology go uncontested, like that's just theology. So people like John MacArthur and folks get a pass who say do not even deal with racism while he's benefiting, a chief beneficiary of white supremacism, right? And so when we think about liberation theology, Christian theology is liberated by its essence. So you're repeating it to say liberation theology, but we also need to name that the prevailing theology that has dominated this landscape in Western Christianity in the Americas here has been white supremacism theology, and we can't let it go unnamed and unchecked, because then it gets the pass. So then when you bring up reading from the bottom up, because we're in Exodus now, the lectionary, right? These are slave narratives, right? Essentially. So this is no different than human beings who were enslaved here in the United States that were talking, that were on the recordings in the 1930s that were talking about the horrendous conditions, but what God bought me over and brought us out. So that's what we're talking about, and just put it in very contemporary terms like that, because people are afraid that they're going to make Mr. Charlie mad if they talk about being liberated as a church, as liberated as the quote unquote white church is.
I want to add too, as churches, we have to stop being sort of trendy social justice. So like when stuff comes up, wear your t-shirts on Sunday, and then by Wednesday, we forgot about it. So first, I think we have to recommit ourselves to the gospel. First and foremost, recommit ourselves to the gospel. And the other thing I would say is, so before I came to Vanderbilt Divinity School, in which it was such a beautiful and liberating experience for me. Before then, I actually attended a seminary in Michigan, and I was the only Black person in the MDiv program. I was the only Black female in the program as well. And you talk about constant attack. It is in those spaces where you will learn for the first time, if you've never heard of liberation theology, that liberation theology is a sort of deviant from the gospel. And so to Reverend Caldwell's point, if the pervading narrative around liberation theology is that that is somehow moving away from the gospel, then we do have to call that out. And we also have to call out our various levels of leadership, not just pastors, but also lay leaders and ministers, for the ways that they continue to seek white validation. They are looking to white churches for a way forward constantly. You have Black churches that do not want to offend, not our own people, because we have also bought into our own suffering, right? So we don't mind ourselves suffering. So we have bought into that. We have to move away from that. And we have to sort of get saved or be reborn, if you will, all over again, in order to do the work correctly. And so the ways that we can maybe help people to embrace this idea of anti-racism is, first, we got to get delivered from anti-Blackness as a people. And then maybe we'll be able to hear, for those that have an ear to hear, let them hear. Maybe we'll be able to hear better this sort of theology and see that it is right in line with the whole notion of what it is that we call ourselves preaching about. So we have to do a lot of decolonization work around what it is that we're teaching and preaching. And I will hope that we can get to a point and we can be repentant about the work that we've done, and we can openly say, I have taught something and I taught that wrong, and I have to go back and reteach it again, right? And that takes work and time, and that's what we are going to have to be invested in, doing the work and the time that it takes to pull people back in, the work and the time that it takes to actually walk in the forgiveness that we say that we've received.
Great. Thank you so very much. As we continue, we have time for one more question and then the final remarks. If you would say, a lot, when we go through life, there's a lot of discoveries that we have along the way. Is there something that you used to believe that through experience in this justice work and experience in ministry and in life, you later discover, no, that was wrong, and that you had the courage to actually state that and then to actually implement that in your life and your ministry at all? Has anyone ever had any experience like that? No awakenings, anybody? Anybody? No? Can't think of one? No. Well, keep living and you will find out that there are some things.
I think we've all had so many, Pastor.
Oh.
Yeah.
So things that we used to think, but that we later found out were actually incorrect. But that's part of life. I believe part of life is openness and transparency and being able to say, hey, this was something I thought, but that I got it wrong, but I want to get it right. And everybody hopefully is in transition, moving from one stage of life and ministry and work to another stage, so that throughout that, I believe we then have the choice or the obligation then to share it with others who are also struggling with things, and not to be so, what can I say, to be so impatient with people who have not quite arrived as we have, because everybody's in their own stage of all of this. And sometimes we have to just meet people right where they are.
So I have one. I was raised a Southern Baptist fundamentalist on inerrancy and that kind of thing. So this is not any shade to Southern Baptists, but this like biblical literalism, but it was only selective, right? And so I realized that it's the thrust of Scripture, and not this kind of, because because, who gains with this kind of interpretive process, right? And so I felt like Christianity, that essentially I was taught your baptism turned you white, and then you can begin, if you performed as a white Christian, then somehow you'd be closer to God. But you would have to shed off not just your sin, but the curse of Ham.
You come a long way, Pastor Caldwell.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
telling you. All right. Anyone else? Anyone else?
I'll add really quick and just say, I don't say this with any sort of pride, but I know that in the beginning of my ministry and teaching and preaching, I have preached and taught oppressive theology. I have, used the pulpit in many ways to harm people. And I think that, again, when we say, I've been forgiven, I've been redeemed, a part of that, as God began to move me and deliver me from that very oppressive idea, it wasn't just enough for me to just say, God, thank you, God, I'm sorry to you, but also to go back to those people that were harmed in that process and own that and move forward. And so I think that that's something that can be redemptive too about the Black church, is the ways in which we can practice what we preach, even in repentance, repenting for the things that we have done or the lack thereof, in order to set ourselves right, not just with God as an exclusive transaction, but also with our communities, to say, be it with women, be it with the LGBTQ community, be it with our other Black brothers and sisters of other faiths, right? All of that we have to confront, and we have to be able to call ourselves to the carpet and say, I was wrong, and I'm sorry, and I'm gonna do better. And to allow those same people also to become influencers as you move forward. So it's not just enough for me to affirm your humanity, if I won't also allow you to influence me moving forward as well, to be able to speak something into my life where I can grow and develop. So I think absolutely apologizing, repenting for the things that we have done. And that is a way that we can strengthen ourselves.
Thank you. We have two last quick questions.
I wanted to share just real quickly. I think it's, as Reverend Caldwell said, you can hold things in and it's hard to bring them back up. But I want to say this because we so ably talked about how the Black woman had been treated within our churches. I just want to say that Black female ministers are treated a different way. And what I had to discover in my ministry, it is Black women that are harder on Black female ministers than Black men are, that they have bought into this ideology that their pastor must be a man. So if you're a woman, you can do some nice things, but you can't be my leader within that. And until we can let go of some of that sexism, the Black church is going to be strapped for a long time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Peters.
Amen to that.
I hope we can get in these two last questions. We have a few minutes left. One is, what are the public policy implications of the property tax referendum in Nashville? As the IMF, we have issued a statement. I issued a statement to the mayor's office regarding that, but I would allow those of you who are panelists to weigh in on that first.
Yeah, I think first is that we know taxes are a bigger burden on poor people than they are on wealthy people. And so as we see continued increases, we know that Black people are going to suffer the largest from that. And in a city where folk cannot afford to live in the county in which they work, it is going to be incumbent upon challenging referendums and initiatives that may not be inherently racist, but their consequences are going to impact Black and brown people at a far greater rate than other folk. And for our city not to look at its moral document, which is its budget, and be able to be accountable for the ways in which it has given away land, it has given away taxes from businesses as incentives to bring them here, which is why in part historic Black communities are now being gentrified, because we've brought in companies and businesses and have not given them tax breaks to now raise the taxes on people that are already burdened to pay for that is atrocious. It is atrocious. And our city has to be creative in a way in which those burdens are alleviated. And anything, and while in our city we're dealing with the response to that, we've got to remember anything from the Koch brothers it ain't nothing we want to sign up for either. And so we have to be committed to electing council persons, to electing mayors, to being present with them, that our council people and other folks responsible for our budget will do so morally and with the unintended consequences set before them, and reminded of that by prophetic.
Thank you so much, Pastor Marble. It is 8:20, it is 8:30, and I will turn this over and thank all of you. And I think Dr. Smallwood may want to do the thanking for all of you coming and being a part of this panel tonight. Dr. Smallwood.
May I just say thank you all. You have really, really opened my eyes, and I believe those of us who have been listening have been piqued in our spirits to understand some deep realities of where we are, because you can't really get to policy development until you understand the thick of things. And you all have really done a marvelous job tonight. So we do thank you. We thank you so much. And I hope that you will continue with us. We have one more conversation, and then we will have a day-long celebration on the 28th of October. Please look out and please sign up and register to be in this final conversation, because Kelly Miller Smith Jr. will be one of our panelists on that one. And our esteemed Dr. Amy Steele will be the moderator for that talk. I cannot say enough how important it is for me, as one seated in the academy with my feet firmly in the street. I cannot say it enough, how important it is for me that we be together, that we talk and reason with one another, come to an understanding and understand one thing. Without us, we can't really achieve much. We've got to be together. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.